greetings to all our viewers. You are welcome to this episode in our continuous series on this channel, African Science and Tech Review. I want to thank you for patronizing this channel. In this episode, we are going to look into the structure, the personality of a human being. What do we mean by that? We want to establish that and present the fact that every human being has two parts. The physical part that you can easily touch and the part you can call the non-physical part. We are going to leave that with our earlier discussion on the three knowledge bases. We are going to establish an analogy between the three knowledge bases and then the human personality with respect to the mind, the body, and the soul, the spirit. We are also going to, illustrate using a simple example, and then we are going to round up the whole essence of today's presentation, enable us to know ourselves. When you know yourself, it helps you to be able to achieve your optimum, to help you to be able to achieve your best in all that you are doing on this earth. Thank you very much. Basic consequence of a human personality. We want to look at the body, the spirit stroke soul, and the mind. We are seeing the body and the mind as close to our popular personality, in the sense that the body is physical, you can touch it. The mind can be said to be semi-physical. You cannot touch it, but it is the seat of your activities, emotions, thinking, thoughts, planning, and all the rest. For the materialists, people just believe that man exists solely as a material being. There is no spiritual aspect to his being. This is where everything ends. We talk about the body and the mind. But in this channel, we actually believe that there is a spirit and that there is a soul for every human being. And not just every human being, every living thing. And not just for every living thing. Every being in existence, whether living or non-living. In the course of this channel, presentations in subsequent episodes, we are going to look at this concept of spirit and soul in more detail. And we will all try to establish and see why we are saying that even inanimate beings have spirit. But that is not for this episode. So we want to see the body, which is physical, the mind, which is semi-physical. It's not touchable, but it is, something you can feel, you can express. And then you have the spirit or soul, which is actually the real personality of the being. But that personality, it is not physical. For those who believe in beings that are beyond the physical, this is actually the representation of every being. The non-physical aspect, and that's what defines that person. And when you talk about reincarnation, life after death, and so on and so forth, for those who believe that man is not just a material being, this is where what you are talking about. And like I said earlier on, we are going to go in depth into the concept of the spirit body on its own, and even the concept of the mind on its own, and the body on its own. Because the whole essence of this channel, we want to see human beings as, consisting of, both the material and the non-material aspect. And it is good for us to understand this, because it will really help us in our imagination. It's going to help us in our thinking. It's going to help us for us to know the limits and the extent of the innate abilities that we have. have that, you understand that, it's going to really help you to be able to perform optimally in this world, to your best, and also to manipulate the resources of nature to your benefit. The psychologists have said that we only use maybe a fraction, maybe 10% of our abilities, to really perform in this world. When you understand the tripartite relationship among the body, the mind, and the spirit soul, you'll be able to get to the level in which you can tap on your innate resources, innate abilities, and get to the peak of your ability. So this is physical, semi-physical, and non-physical. And we can see the analogy. We can see beside this we have presented the three knowledge bases which we treated in an earlier episode. The science, the theology, and philosophy. We are putting the two side by side for a purpose because, all along, shortly, towards the end of this episode, we are going to have a link. We are going to have a model. We are going to relate the three knowledge bases to the human personality that we have depicted as the body, the spirit, soul, and the mind. And we can see the way we have arranged everything. And here, we are saying that it's also bidirectional. The body interacts with the spirit soul interacts with the body. The mind interacts with the spirit soul interacts with the mind. The body interacts with the mind interacts with the body. The extent of that interaction, we are going to be going in depth in the course of presentations in this time. So the knowledge basis we have presented earlier. Then we can see, we have said that humans are not material alone. Because there are some people whose philosophy is materialism. They just believe that everything begins and ends with the material. That is, once a person dies, that is the end. There's nothing like the spiritual aspect of the person. There's nothing like the soul aspect of the person. I also want us to know that we have just used spirit soul. We have grouped the two together. Some scholars, some intellectuals, theologians tend to divide this into two, the spirit and the soul, and some even go further to explain the various levels of the soul and the various levels of the spirit. But for simplicity, we don't want to go, we just want to represent the aspect that is non-material. We just want to simply call it spirit and the soul. Maybe in future we might be able to separate the two and treat each one of them separately. So, now we have said that this is the material aspect, this is like semi-material, semi-physical, and this is the non-physical, the non-material aspect. So, we are saying that the immaterial components of the human personality, you have the mind and the spirit, soul, which you have here. Okay? Both are the non-physical, what we call the non-physical or not totally physical aspects of the human personality. And then we come here, we want to use a representation, a diagram, that can really give us an insight into the inclusion of one constituent in another. We have used a representation that looks like a Venn diagram in mathematics. We can see the mind here, we can see the body, and we can see the spirit soul. So the way it's represented, we can see that you have the body which encompasses the mind. So we are saying the mind is located inside the body. And then you have the spirit soul which encompasses the body. So you can say that the spirit soul encompasses the body, and of course, once it encompasses the body, it encompasses the mind. We are just presenting a simple sketch, a simple representation, so that we can follow and we can understand ourselves, who we are. Every human being must understand who he or she is. There is a saying in some philosophical circles that 3 basic things are important for a human being to understand. The first one, you have to know yourself. And that is the essence of the presentations in this channel, for us to know who we are generally as a person. And then for each and every listener, every viewer to really know who he or she is. Because the general presentation is, the representation, the schematic structure for all human beings. But every human being still has some peculiarities, some characteristics. The characteristics which distinguish one person from the other. Even twins will not necessarily have the same peculiarities. They might have some things that are similar and they have some things that are not similar. So I've just said that there are 3 basic things which some philosophers, some intellectuals, and some thinkers, some theologians, some free thinkers, and some people who are doing some free religion, they have proposed. The first one, you know yourself, as I've said, and that entails trying to find out what you are as a human being, what you are as a general human being, and what you are as a person. Then the second principle, which they have adduced among the 3 basic steps, that you should be yourself. Having known yourself, be yourself. Don't try to be like another person. Don't try to do things like another person. You can actually imitate or try to find good things in some other person. But don't ever try that you want to be like this person. Every human being has some unique abilities, some abilities that can be called advantageous, and some abilities that can be called disadvantageous. It's good to try to understand the advantages that others have and try to tap into it, but always try to be yourself. And the third step, or the third principle, which these intellectuals have canvassed for, is that for those who believe that there is a being beyond the material self, that you should know yourself, you should know God. So let's recap it once again. Know yourself, be yourself, and then you know God. So this channel, the whole idea of this channel is to make us to realize that, to make us to try to understand, to know ourselves, to be ourselves, and to know God. And when we say God, the supreme being, something beyond the physical. So the analogy, we want to use this analogy we have presented in mind. We said the mind is situated inside the body. It's a simple model, and the body is situated inside the spirit soul. So this analogy for us to have a vivid imagination of what we are talking about, because we know that the audience of this channel is very diverse. Some are quite conversant with some of the things we are presenting. Some, they are trying to get those things. Some are just starting. So we want to try as much as possible to address the needs of as many of the viewers as possible. So we can see the analogy using a vehicle. You have your engine, the driver. Of course, this is just a simple analogy. There are several other analogies we can present with respect to the vehicle. I'm just trying to use this. So you have the engine and the driver there. Then you have your chassis. The engine and the driver, they are inside the chassis, the body of the car. Of course, just like the body of a human being is useless without the mind and with the soul. For instance, when you see a dead body, the body cannot move, cannot think, cannot initiate any emotional thought, any imagination, and so on and so forth. So the mind and the spirit soul, they help to sustain the body. So the same thing when you have the chassis, it's just the body. So the move on its own, in its equilibrium state, in its natural state, as a spirit. You will understand why the forefathers, the ancient Africans, why people in the olden days, they had some, immovable objects, which people tend to think that, oh, these are the objects they are worshipping. And they say they are worshipping God, but you see the objects. The objects are just representation of what they are worshipping. And you can actually transfer, so to say, spirit to a non-living thing. You can make a non-living thing, and that's part of the abilities and the gifts that God, the Supreme Being, has given to human beings. You can manipulate non-living things, and that's people do it a lot. You can, transfer a spirit to a non-living thing, and then you can now start manipulating that non-living thing. It is still possible, just like the mind can be manipulated. You have people manipulating people's mind to make people to do some things. So all those things are within the realm of science, actually. But some could be called African science, some could be called general science, and not just African science. All the various knowledge systems. When you talk about the Oriental systems, along the eastern part of the world, China, Asia, Middle East, and so on and so forth, they have, one way or the other, they have their structure. Their structures that are similar to what we are presenting. The whole essence of this channel is to say that, it's not the religion that will save a person. Every religion has the good aspect and the bad, the aspect that you can say it is bad. So our whole purpose is to annex the various benefits or the advantages of the various religions and try to see how we can have what we can call a universal truth without being biased. Because religion evolved based on human perceptions from time to time. Maybe, in the course of this channel, in a subsequent episode, we are going to look at religion and theology itself. What is the link between religion and theology? But in order for us not to digress, let us go on with the presentation of today, which is the basic constituents of human personality. Then you have, we have used the vehicle as an analogy. And then, of course, when you talk about a vehicle, you talk about a car, motorcycle, tricycle, or aircraft. An aircraft is a vehicle, but an aircraft is not an automobile. Of course, in terms of the driver of the vehicle, of course, we mentioned the engine here. The engine, even though the engine is there, the engine itself is going to be static. It cannot drive the chassis, except there is a driver. So, we are just trying to give a sketch, refresh our memory on what the kind of driver you can have for a vehicle. For the normal manual vehicle, automatic vehicle, so to say, automatic in the sense that it still needs to be driven, still needs to be, controlled by something. Then you have a woman that will drive the manual vehicle. And then, of course, these days we have the autonomous vehicles. Vehicles that will just be moving and there is no visible human being. Then that's where artificial intelligence, AI, comes in. And of course, AI has been driving a lot of activities in human world. It has really brought forth a lot of issues to change the status quo in the global system of things. Of course, the other time we mentioned the aircraft as an instance of a concept in science fiction that became reality. Robots is also one of them. Before we started the advent of robots, because the usage of robots in the contemporary times, many science fictions have written about robots, and which people thought it was not possible to have something like that. So as many things that have existed in the realm of science fiction, they will keep on coming into conventional science, conventional science. And of course, as many things also that it cannot be regarded as, metaphysical. People think that, we cannot understand it is spiritual. They're going to start coming into the realm of conventional science. And people can see that all these things, can actually be explained. We can use the principles of science, experiment. We can use the principle of philosophy, logic, to explain some of those things. For instance, we know what magicians do. What they do is to try to manipulate some of those things and then bring them to reality, one way or the other. So, in the course of this time, we're going to look at various examples like that and see that the universe is actually for human beings. We are there, we are intelligent beings, we are supposed to understand the way it operates and then manipulate those forces of nature to our own benefit. Of course, we cannot do that except we understand who we are as a human being. And here, we are summarizing the presentation with respect to the constituents of the human personality and trying to find a link between the knowledge-based system, the three knowledge bases, and then the constituents of the human personality. We can actually see the way the diagrams are drawn: body, science, spirit, soul, theology, mind, philosophy. So, we are saying that your body is equivalent to science in the sense that it is the touchable, the part that you can perform experiments easily on. The spirit soul is the theology, and then the philosophy is the mind. It's just a simple model, a simple analogy for us to have a glimpse of who we are as a human being. Of course, we know the importance of models in real life. In the course of, in a subsequent edition, we are going to really look into the concept of models and how useful they are in the natural system of things. In the physical sciences, in the sciences, models are being used extensively because they help us to understand things that ordinarily we thought they are not possible. So we are able to explain in this episode of this channel, African Science and Tech Review, the concept of the human personality. We link it up with the knowledge basis, and we say that for someone who is not a materialist, who is not just limited, doesn't believe that everything ends with the material being. That here you can talk about the material being, and here we are talking of something beyond the material, but it's very significant. Many traditions, like African traditional religions, they really put emphasis on this. The concept of, your spirit, that even before a human being exists and comes to the world, the spirit is at play, and the spirit, when you finish, you return back. And many Oriental religions too, in terms of reincarnation, in terms of, life after death, they believe in this. It is within the science, conventional science, that we need to establish this fact so that they can come into conventional science. All that we are presenting, I would say that they are actually science, but not necessarily part of the conventional science. Of course, psychology has done a lot and has brought so many things into conventional science, but there are still many, many phenomena that are existing outside the conventional science, but should come into conventional science. The purpose of this channel is to help us use the tools of mathematics, use the tools of computer science, what is known in psychology, and physics, quantum physics, particle physics, many other areas of study, so that we can have a universal truth. A truth that is all-encompassing, a truth that is comprehensive, truth that is based on truth and is not based on falsity. So we can have, we have used the vehicle, and then we summarize by saying the science and body, we can link them together, the spirit, soul, theology as a form of analogy, then the mind and the philosophy together. So that ends this episode. If you have questions, please feel free at any time to ask your questions, make your comments, and we promise as much as possible to try to walk in line with your suggestions. And we are going to be bringing very interesting episodes in this channel. Thank you very much.